That's not all.
Being a born and bred New Yorker, being loud will not be a problem. In a highly technological world, I might be. So just bear with me one moment. But let me welcome all of you, and I hope most of you had a pretty good lunch, which we enjoyed serving you. And we're very fond of our experience at the Marriott, but like everything else in life, not everything goes perfect, so feel free to help me. In any case, this is a wonderful opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity for us all to get. And hopefully, the mic will go on eventually. However, we're going to do that. One of my responsibilities is to welcome all of you, and I really do. I'm very excited every time we have a function and we bring everybody in, regardless of the fact that we're a distance learning institution, and we do wonderfully online, and we use Adobe Connect, and we communicate in all forms. It's still great to see it. It really is. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure to give you lunch. It is a pleasure to check on your classes. It is a pleasure to work with all of you. So thank you very much for that privilege. My second responsibility today, which the leaders of this residency told me I had a very short amount of time, and so I'm following what the leaders have told me, is to introduce to you our president, Roger Soulet. Again, I don't have too much time to do that, so I'm going to be concise and tell you that Roger came to the Union Institute University approximately 14 years ago. I have been working with him since that very day, so I can tell you that the experience has been extraordinary. But the experience has also been extraordinary because of the many, many people with whom he has networked, and therefore I have been able to network. So I always say to people, which isn't a really cool thing to say, but it's a pleasure to know you are paid to learn at all times. And when you're in higher ed, sometimes you get really lucky and you just pay to learn. And believe me, you learn every day. Raj has been here approximately 14 years, and he came to Union Institute and University from 14 years at Kellogg Foundation. And his focus was on the leadership component. And he actually supervised at the Kellogg Foundation and trained over 700 Kellogg fellows. Now, just managing 700 smart people was really hard. But he did it. And when he left Kellogg and came here, he brought with him a focus and a knowledge on collaborative leadership at a time that we were having, as any small institution does, lots of challenges. And he met those challenges, but he did bring this whole emphasis on collaborative leadership, teaching us that all leadership is relational and that we take care of one another. And sometimes we don't do everything, but at least we say, oops, we made a mistake, and how can we make it better? So I want to introduce you to our president, Roger Sublette, who's going to have the privilege of introducing you to our main speaker today, Dr. Betty Overton-Adkins. And I'll let him tell you all about her, except I will tell you she's a really good person who does some very important things. Oh, sure, I'm good. Yeah, lots of them. Is it working? Oh, good. Now, so with further ado, I introduce you to our president.
Thank you very much. Arlene, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I want to express appreciation to everyone in this room, particularly to our students, for choosing Union Institute University and investing your time, energy, and talent in this institution. And we expect great things from you in future days after you leave this university. I also want to express appreciation to the faculty and staff of the doctoral programs. They are the real leaders of this university in helping our students meet their educational goals and objectives. And I particularly want to recognize the work that Dr. Sachs has done in the PhD program, our faculty, Dr. Nancy Boxell, particularly with the Martin Luther King Jr. program, Stuart Burns, and a variety of other folks who have made this kind of program possible at the university. And I had an opportunity, I don't know if Larry is here this afternoon, but I had an opportunity to visit with Larry Preston this morning, and I also want to recognize Larry's work for helping us put these PhD programs together, really reconstructing them beginning in 2001, 2002. So thanks to all of you. It is a real pleasure to have members of our Board of Trustees here today, which I think indicates to you the support and enthusiasm and the respect they have for our doctoral programs. The chair of our board, Mr. Don Feldman, is sitting back here. Don. We have Dr. Jim Ash, who is here. Stand up. Nick is a member of the trustee. And Edgar Smith, who is a business in Cincinnati, and Edgar's a fairly tall kind of guy. I was at Racing Trustees a few months ago, and the only person in the room I missed was Edgar. And I told him to stand up so I could see him. So Edgar, I made it today. We also have Betty Overton-Adkins, who is a trustee Betty's been on the board for quite some time and has provided real leadership, particularly in the academic area. So I'll introduce Betty again in just a moment. Have I missed any other trustee? Good, I did well. I always get nervous when I start introducing people and not have a list in front of me. Betty Overton-Adkins and I first met in 1989 when I began my career at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and Betty was a member of Group 9 in the Kellogg Fellowship Program. And at the time, she was dean of the graduate school at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And as I recall, Betty was working with Philander C. Smith College and helping them with some of their leadership challenges in the HBCU program in Arkansas. I ended up being Betty's program director. And so I got a chance to tell her what to do. And it was one of the few times in my life I've ever been able to tell Betty what to do. But when it came time, as I continued to work with the fellowship program, when it came time for me to have an opportunity to hire an associate director, Betty immediately jumped to mind. And so I called her in Little Rock and invited her up to Battle Creek, and we interviewed her, and we hired her as an associate director of the Kellogg Fellowship Program. And I got to keep her for 2 years in that role until everybody in the foundation found out how good she was. And then they took her away from me and made her the coordinator of higher education. And what really was interesting about that was for the leadership component in the fellowship program, Betty reported to me. For my role in higher education at Kellogg, I reported to Betty. So we got to be very good friends, and we learned quickly how to collaborate and work together. Over the years, Betty and I have traveled internationally together. I can't tell you all the countries in Latin America we toured, but I do remember one particular trip. We were in Honduras organizing an international experience for Kellogg Fellows, and we were meeting with a group of people who were involved in land reform. And when Betty and I met with them, they put both of us, it was on the second story, right off of a plaza, and they put Betty and me in front of the windows. There were large windows there. And I thought, well, this is a little bit strange, but it was okay. And we had a conversation, and there was a picture of a gentleman on the wall, and we asked about him. And as it turned out, they looked at each other, and that gentleman had been assassinated the week prior to our arrival because of his work in land reform. Betty and I both looked at each other, and then not only was it unbelievable that that kind of violence was occurring in Honduras at the very moment that we were there, but the fact that they put us in front of the windows on the plaza, we suddenly understood that we were a bit expendable. And it was a humbling experience, but also a frightening experience. Betty and I were also in El Salvador, and we were in San Salvador on the week that the peace accords were signed. So that I have known Betty for a lot of years. We've worked very closely together. And I've been a great admirer of her intellect. And at Kellogg, what you probably don't know, and it's not included in her resume and her bio is very impressive. But Betty at Kellogg, as coordinator of higher education, took the leadership of the HBCU initiative. That program invested about $30 million in 10 HBCUs programs to look for programs of excellence. Betty provided the leadership for that. It was a phenomenal success. We then took on Hispanic serving institutions, and we spent another $30 million in building leadership development and helping Hispanic serving institutions serve another segment of American population. And then the last major initiative that we took involved private colleges. And we worked with about 29 or 30 colleges among Native Americans. The one thing that struck me, the organizing meeting for that private college was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and all of the tribal leaders said, we really appreciate Kellogg's interest, but we're not going to compete for these grants. If you want to give money to the tribal colleges, you'll give the equal amount of money to everyone. And that's exactly what Kellogg did. They gave another $30 million for these tribal colleges. Betty has served in the American Council of Education. She's worked with leadership development and higher education associations around this country. She has probably had more impact on diversity and higher education than any other educational administrator I have ever met. For her to come today and to take time from a busy schedule to be with you is absolutely a testimonial to her commitment to this university and to our doctoral students, and to do so in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy is absolutely terrific. I oftentimes quote the prophets in Deuteronomy who state, "We often drink from wells we did not dig, and we warm ourselves by fires we did not build." Betty has lived with that motto a long time. She understands the legacy, she understands the struggle, and she understands the shoulders on which she stands. But more importantly, folks, she has allowed her shoulders to be used by others. And she has reached out to you and generations way beyond you to make a difference in higher education, and particularly for diverse communities. Betty, you're a living example of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy, his philosophy. We're delighted that you chose to spend some time with us today. It's indeed an honor for me to introduce my friend and colleague and member of the Board of Trustees of Union Institute University, Dr. Betty Overton-Adkins. Please join me.
First of all, good afternoon. And thank you, Roger, for that wonderful introduction. Brings back lots of memories of our travel and our time together. And as I was sitting there, I was feeling myself growing and growing and growing. My head growing and growing. So what you saw come up the stairs is this 4-day woman is really now about 6-something and ready to try out for some women's basketball. Thank you. Indeed, I am very pleased to be here for many reasons. First, as a trustee of the institution, that for so many years has been a leader in non-traditional education in this nation. In its earliest model, the Union Institute, or the University Without Walls, pioneered graduate education in innovative, inclusive formats that heralded new opportunities for expanded scholarship and academic leadership that allowed new voices and ways of thinking about the contribution to the academic arena. At the center of its vision, this institution has always been this pursuit of social justice through the provision of education that brought to many people, those that you educated directly, but also those its graduates served, a greater intellectual, economic, and social freedom. Second, I'm glad I'm here because this convening is the coming together of Union's graduate students for their residency. I think I understand, having been at institutions that do this. So I've come to this presentation as an opportunity to have a conversation with fellow scholars and learners interested in bringing new insights and leadership with new education and indeed the part of social justice. And finally, I come here welcoming the privilege of being part of the Union's celebration of Martin Luther King's legacy, reveling in the fact that year after year, we have the opportunity to recount, review, and reconnect to a vision that inspired a nation, one which has not been fully realized, and in fact, I will suggest in some ways, we've taken some backward steps rather than going forward toward the vision. Reverend King's work spanned a formative period in my development. I was a sophomore in college when he died, and the goals and visions of the civil rights movement have shaped my philosophical views and influenced my career decisions. So I am delighted to be with you and to share this celebration of one of my heroes. been delighted with the opportunity. I must admit also that I have struggled with the presentation. The struggle was caused by the assignment by Dr. Arlene Sack, the Associate Vice President of the Graduate Program here. Some of you know Dr. Sack. She's up here. She is a formidable woman with a big vision for graduate education at Union, big ideas, and high expectations. When she called me to ask me to make the presentation, she gave me my marching orders. She identified the audience and said the presentation needed to be mindful of these various persons who would be in the audience. She said the presentation needed to be intellectually challenging, grounded in research, because a major portion of the audience would be Union's graduate students. It needed to be practical, with an applied nature for the type of students that Union attracts these scholar practitioners. It needed to touch on a variety of issues for the PhD students with majors in humanities, ethical leadership, public policy, and social relevance. It needed to address issues of social justice and public policy. Further, she added a good number of the students were in the MLK specialization, so it should draw on the work and legacy of Martin Luther King. And because the EUD students are an equal part of the audience, it would be good if it would touch on leadership and service, a major focus of their study. Finally, she reminded me that there may be some community persons in the audience who want inspiration. And by the way, if I could do this in less than, it would be great. So in your program, you have a title of the presentation, Intellectual Intersectionality of the Legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., the Complex Dynamics of Leadership and Social Justice. But that's only an abbreviation. The real version of the presentation examination of the values of intersectionality for education and social change as grounded in identity theory that focuses on social and relational justice that can influence policy formation as understood through the prism of leadership concepts embedded in the philosophy of Martin Luther King and the implications of these concepts for the world. Now, if I can say something even remotely, in all seriousness, all the words and ideas captured in this long title, and abstract and academic as they sound, when strung together that manner, are indeed important, especially when we consider the King legacy and relevancy in a not historical perspective, but with a view to now, today. Ferguson, Missouri, Eric Garner, the escalation of the Middle East conflict, immigration reform, violence against women, and many other issues facing our society and our world. These ideas, which I have intentionally strung together in an attempt at humor, to call us to think about renewed efforts to do something meaningful in the world. I believe those of you who are students are pursuing this academic pathway offered at Union because you understand these words and want to make them more than empty rhetoric. It is because words have power to provoke and prepare that I hope you will indulge me as I examine a word today as part of the presentation. I'd like to start my musing with this word. A word I admit I had never heard of 3 or 4 years ago. As you heard from the introduction, in recent years, I have been heavily involved in academic and administrative issues, reading institutional budgets and strategic plans rather than keeping up with the latest scholarly articles. However, after arriving at the University of Michigan, part of my assignment was to teach in our diversity and social justice master's concentration, a program not dissimilar from the work we teach. In my course preparation and in my conversation with colleagues, immediately a new term found me. This term, intersectionality, or the theory of intersectionality. The literature on diversity and inclusion was full of this term. I began to have to confront its meaning, its origin, and its usefulness to what I was attempting to teach in an educational program that has a concentration on higher education, seeing through the lens of diversity and social justice. How many of you know this term, intersectionality? Let me just see that. It's a term that has started to gain prominence in the literature around diversity and social justice. I asked my significant other, who is not an educator but a well-read person, if he had ever heard the word. He told me no. He sounded like he didn't want to talk about it. And he asked what it meant. I told him, and he looked at me and puzzled and said, wasn't the concept obvious? Then he added, the problem with you educators is instead of doing something to solve these issues, you make up new big words to describe them that only you can understand. I kind of laughed at that. But please know I quickly defended our language making and theory making. I countered his critique with the idea that scholarship is giving our society new concepts and new ways of thinking, and language that can more accurately describe situations and phenomena. The dollar words themselves are not only symbols of the meanings behind them. So part of what I am attempting today is this epistemological walk between the academy and what is happening. I also mused in his sense of the obvious of ideas. If ideas are so obvious, intersectionality, why is it still so hard for us to act? So let's start with what is this term? Intersectionality. This obviously is that my friend saw. It's a concept, and I do not plan to do justice to the vast array of scholarship that has emerged around here. In fact, I will use it in the most general conceptualization. I will define it in more detail later. But for me, intersectionality simply means a way to express how our interconnected realities, identities, impact our interconnected lives in society. The concept helps me to think about the ways our issues and identities intersect, and especially the way they connect rather than divide us. To understand intersectionality, we need to understand what we mean when we talk about identity. Identity is an integral part of our core sense of self. It is the consistent yet potentially flexible way we negotiate who we are in the world with others. Identity development is mediated by group members of various kinds, related to both physical characteristics and the individual choices about where and how we fit with others on a wide contingent of preferences and abilities. Identity shapes what we see, feel, believe, and value, and therefore contributes greatly to our own worldview, as well as what we assume about the worldview of others not like us. None of us sits in just one category of identity. To deal with the issues of our lives and community, we act across areas. This is the essence of the concept of intersectionality. Identity bestows a sense of power and privilege, or it can relegate us to marginality, depending on the cultural and the social context in which it occurs. If we can understand this sense of identity, we can appreciate the concept of intersectionality. The recognition that our intersecting identities are similar or neither one similar to each other. I, for example, interact within our society through multiple identities that impact me in different levels of complexity in different ways at different times. I am an American-born Black, African-American, with roots in Cuban culture, female, identify as Southern, though I now live in the Midwest, Christian, middle class, but born in Chicago, heterosexual, and educated. There are other identities I could also recount. I'm now a senior citizen, short, and the category I most hate to admit in this public place, and you can see it. I'm now on the category of the overweight. And believe me, that category is a great consequence. The theory of intersectionality tries to help explain how those identities intersect and interact within society, and as significant, society's response. The term intersectionality was created about 26 years ago, though it has gained more prominence over the last 10 years as an emerging scholarship has sprung up around it. And there are many scholars looking at this idea, Nash, McCullough, Hancock, Davis, and many others, and I can give you references to their works. And the concept and theory are being applied in many fields: sociology, social work, psychology, education, leadership theory, and international relations. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality around 1989. And as she and her colleagues were developing the elements of critical race theory as a legal concept, Crenshaw, a Harvard-educated lawyer and civil rights activist, was initially looking at the conditions of Black females, seeking to develop a critique of legal precedents that treated race and gender as exclusive and separate parts of human experience, and that as a result ignored Black women's experiences, or for that matter, any intersectional realities. She described intersectionality as our experiences of race, class, gender, sexuality, and nationality intersect to produce a social location that is equal to more than just the sum of its parts. Any individual in the social order experiences different forms of privilege and subordination depending on their race, class, gender, sexuality, and nationality. Because each of these constructs is hierarchical, intersecting forms of domination, produce both oppression and opportunity. Her analysis was intended to highlight that Black women's experiences of oppression differ from their white sisters, whose main focus was on gender discrimination, and also from Black men, whose predominantly were focused on racial subjugation. And therefore, legal solutions for issues related to these intersectional complications needed to take these into consideration. Crenshaw developed the intersectionality theory in relationship to domestic violence shelters, describing the case, for example, of a woman who was not admitted to one because her broken English was not deemed to be of a high enough standard. In that situation, both the woman's gender and her race were contributing to the situation she faced. The challenges of one could not be solved without dealing with the other. But the court saw the case as an issue of racial discrimination only, handicapping the attorneys in their arguments. Crenshaw was looking for an accessible term that would capture this dilemma, therefore, intersectionality. Intersectionality, she explained, is like the multiple traffic intersections coming together. The main streets may be Racism Avenue or Sexism Boulevard, but if we are to get where we're going without major wrecks, we have to find a way to learn the rules of yield and go, or we'll kill ourselves. Essentially, in finding ways to think of our subgroup identifications, Black women, gay Asian men, poor white, multiracial young people. Intersectionality seeks to find connections and ways of combating the isms of our society and help us craft solutions that address more than one group. This is the promise of a deeper understanding of intersectionality. Are some of these things obvious, as my friends said? Maybe. But the word and the concept offer a new way of articulating the complexity of our different yet mutual struggles to find meaning and to live together in a global society. Now, while Crenshaw coined the term, the situation that intersectionality explains had already been an important topic, especially in some areas like Black feminism. One of the most well-known expressions of this idea of intersectionality occurred almost a century before Crenshaw coined the term. Living from 1797 to 1883, Sojourner Truth, a well-known abolitionist and a moving speaker on women's rights, articulated the concept in her well-known Ain't I a Woman speech, given at the National Women's Suffrage Conference in Akron, Ohio. Truth's speech, this speech and another Truth speech, keeping things going while things are stirring, represent early ideas of intersectionality. Truth speaks of her experience of being a slave and Black, and also of her experience of being a woman. While she voices her support for women in the women's movement, she also reminded her listeners that her particular experience as a Black woman, a slave woman, overlaps and creates a unique identity location. Crenshaw would say that also needed to be addressed. The truth is asking if there are solutions that can address both of these issues. Truth's speech in a woman points out the different experiences of a woman because of race, and still recognizes the oppression that all women have experienced due to their sex. Of course, my friend would say Truth's experience is obvious. She is not white. In those times, she would not have been treated the same as white women. And yet, that part of the obviousness of her gender was obscured in the thinking of her merely Black. And by lumping all women together, the men, and many women at the time, denied the identity of the truth of a larger population of the nation. Truth's contribution at the time was that she was unafraid to speak openly about the unobvious, and in doing so expose the contradictions. It is that speaking out and giving voice to both the differences that are part of who we are that she best connects threads of gender, race, ethnicity, and other areas that bring us together to share common agendas. But Truth's contribution goes even further. Her speech ties together some of the elements of the theory of intersectionality, recognition of oppression of privilege, acknowledgement of overlapping relations and other identities. And finally, confronting the intersection as a call to change, those things you see on this slide. And it is especially the communication process that her speech generated at the time and continues to generate that we find what Crenshaw sees as the defining rationale for intersectionality. Truth refuses to allow herself to be defined only by her Black identity, or to be limited to speaking out only against slavery. It is indeed intersectionality's ability to name our multidimensional natures that makes it useful. It is making the obvious and the sometimes unobvious connections among us visible, and using those connections to ensure that more people get just treatment. Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" Or when Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" it was because the prominence of her racial identity was already well established. W.E.B. Du Bois, the sociologist, identified the color line as the major issue of the 20th century. He did not realize that the problem would follow us into the 21st century, but even with even more complexity. Our society is no longer merely Black and white, though quite honestly, never was. though much of the dominant conversation still focuses on the historic color conflict as a defining texture of the American experience for Native people. Today, the color line looks quite different. Hispanics and Asians are the fastest growing racial population in the nation. And the 2010 census showed that people who reported multiple races grew by a larger percentage than those reporting a single race by as much as 50%. So the new complexity of the race law of the color line calls for different kinds of thinking, even about racism, which is still alive and well in America despite declarations of a post-racist society. Even the current issues of the day, Ferguson and other events, tell us that racism still looms large in our midst. But if we just look deep enough, the issues of Ferguson and the issues of immigration are not far apart. If we choose to make the careful walk between them, we find some of the same issues. Intersectionality calls out those crosswalks between and among issues that deny personhood and identity. We are here today on the occasion of the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's life and legacy. So what does this have to do with that legacy? Let me share a few connections. Dr. King, like Sojourner Truth, also probably never used the word intersectionality. But it is clear that he too would know what it means. He got it. And he acted on its implications. He practiced the concept of intersectionality long before it became a term of debate for academic scholars. While King's primary focus was attention to race and the oppression of Black people, we know that his vision expanded to become more inclusive. Somewhere along the way, King's heart and intellect made the crosswalk to that inclusiveness that understood the definition of intersectionality. And lending his support to others mired in the quagmire of the isms, he was not abandoning his fight for Black people. He was enhancing it. He said, "It is impossible to struggle for civil rights, equal rights for Blacks, without including whites, because equal rights, fair play, justice, or all right air. We all have it, but none of us has it. That is the truth of it." At another time, he said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an unescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single dominant destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." As I noted, Dr. King got it. Today, Dr. King is most often remembered as a crusader for racial equality, not economic justice. But he was also a social engineer with a vision for lifting people out of poverty. We often fail to remember that King was killed not so much because of his dreams about social equality as his challenge to income equality and a system of policies designed to keep people in economic status. He recognized that his fight had to be conducted on multiple fronts, inextricably intertwined. The intersection of race and economics was something he understood. To be white and poor did not carry the same scars, but similar ones to being Black and poor. Both people were scarred, and those scars often caused them to work against each other rather than together. We can see some of these same tensions today being forged between Black and Hispanic communities, whose kids have the lowest school performance, who evidence similar levels of poverty and health disparity, and whose men disproportionately end up in prison. They share intersectional concerns. King's famed 1963 March on Washington's full name was actually the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And in the last years of his life, King poured most of his energy into launching the Poor People's Campaign, not the Poor Black People's Campaign, but an inclusive organization dedicated to advocating for economic justice for all people. King's message and mission is the language of intersection. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We already know that all oppressions are connected by having material needs. But in claiming that all oppression and exploitation intertwine, there is a recognition by King and intersectionality that all oppression is rooted in the same societal structures. And if we fight them, we all win, no matter your place on the identity map. Today, one of the manifestations of those oppressions is the horrifying gun violence we experience, especially the killings we have seen between our police officers and African American men. King himself was a victim of gun violence. In the wake of traumatizing acts of gun violence, King's own death reminds us of the horrible reality of violence and the need for more than a change in gun policy, but a sustained movement for changing the way law enforcement and everyday citizens respond to each other. The most recent cases have been African American males, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, and Ezel Ford. But one does not have to look far to find similar issues within the Hispanic community, the Native American community, and even for white communities. We do not need to wonder whether Dr. King would be speaking out on this situation. It does not take much stretching of the imagination to know he would. Neither blaming the victim or the police, but continuing his critique of a system that encourages profiling, liberal gun laws, poor training of our civil authorities, and a general sense of distrust of authority within certain communities because of historic oppression. These are transsectional social issues that require more complex and nuanced analysis than just racism. King understood the concept of intersectionality. Evidence of King's intersectional approach can also be found in the way Martin King and his colleagues framed the nature of the movement. The language of King and the civil rights leaders was a language that implied an intersectional approach to redressing historic disparities and as major goals of the society. King posited the idea that little black children and little white children would live together in brotherhood. King's vision was not one easily designated as what I call mere diversity. In an examination of his speeches and writings, you will seldom find the word diversity, but the vision of an integrated, intersected society was the key theme. I have a dream that one day on the hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood, King and Tony. King's dream was explicitly integrationist, calling on whites as well as blacks, and now Latinos, Asians, and others to be a truly shared nation. And it was precisely that vision that thrilled his multiracial audience in August of 1963 at the March on Washington, turning what had been a humdrum address into an iconic national ovation. And it is this vision of multicultural and intersected world that has made him an icon in the U.S. and across the globe. And it is this vision of social justice that merits his place in history. What I think I learned from studying intersectionality and considering Dr. King is that intersectionality became an approach to leadership. While it served leadership, transformational leadership, it was a lens through which he began to exercise leadership and pursue his vision. But as we all know, visions are illusionary things. Now we see them, now we don't. Based on recent data, at some levels, King's vision still seems far away. 60 years after the Brown versus Topeka, Kansas decision, because of our resistance, continued segregated housing patterns, because of poverty, we are resegregating our schools and our neighborhoods. In 1972, due to strong federal enforcement, only about 25% of Black students in the South attended schools in which at least 9 out of 10 students were minority. In districts released from desegregation orders between 1990 and 2010, 63% of Black students now attend such schools. That means Black students are also Black attending schools where they are the majority, according to an analysis by both Republicans. And guess what? It isn't just happening in the South and in K-12 schools. At the University of Michigan, where I now teach and serve, the enrollment of African American students has dropped significantly, so that almost 20% of African American students of 10 years ago is now, so that almost 20% of African American students of 10 years ago is now only 4%. Some of you may have heard of the hashtag BBUM campaign at Michigan, being Black at the University of Michigan. And it was only a year ago that the university recognized its Michigan undocumented students as Michigan residents for tuition purposes, so that these students are now relegated, so that these students are not relegated only to community colleges. While I acknowledge that we are far different society than we were during the civil rights era, I also suggest we will need to be vigilant that we don't move away from the intersecting lives that King dreamed might emerge in this country. Efforts to be more inclusive and to integrate our lives and communities on the surface seem to have made great strides. We have a Black president. We may have a woman president. But we can't take backward steps to a formulated notion of this mere diversity, which too often becomes a Noah and an Ark type of check off to ensure that we have minimal representational inclusion. 2 or 3 of this, some of that, rather than an examination of our organizational culture to ensure that the microaggressions and cultural biases of exclusion are not still at work with our institutions and organizations. I'm not saying that we don't need representational diversity. I'm saying as much that we need more relational diversity, in which our intersecting identities allow us to be allies in shared concern and service to each other. When I watched the protests related to the latest rash of shootings of Black men, I am elated to see that in most communities, the people on the street concerned about the issues are not just Black people. In some communities, the groups are largely Latino or white. People who understand that this is not just about just a Black community issue. And I want us to also see African Americans concerned about the issues of immigration, not negatively out here for our jobs, but because the same issues of fair wages, academic performance of our children, access to college, and access to home life confront us all. Quite honestly, at my age, I want a lot of young Black people working and making money and paying into the Social Security system. Many human and ecological problems facing us continuously stem from relational injustices that cause us to interact with one another based on ill-defined notions, unfounded biases, inadequate knowledge, and lack of empathy. Might I again cite Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, John Crawford, and Chuck Ford. Thus, relational justice and social justice are models congruent with the core values of intersectionality, which was one of the values of God. At the end of a class last year, when we were having what I thought was a deep discussion about these issues, one student who usually doesn't have very much to say in class finally raised her hand and said, Dr. B, I think I understand what you are trying to get us to see about intersectionality. I understand the concept, it's kind of obvious, but what do I do with it? I'm sure some of you may be asking the same thing. I started my response to her by reminding her that our class was about social justice. And intersectionality is a concept that lets us think more deeply about what we mean by social justice. And more important, how do we do social justice? It's another lens to see through. Robert Chang and Jeremy Cohen, in their article, After Intersectionality, note that in thinking about intersectionality, the first thing is to remember the so what question. It is one thing to say that race, gender, sexuality, class, and citizenship operate symbiotically, multidimensionally, and interconnectedly. Analysis like this is important. The next step is to be able to describe or imagine points of intersection. They know that intersectionality caught on because Crenshaw had very specific points of intervention in the courts with regard to legal doctrine application of Title VII. And these new interpretations help all women, not just the women in those shelters. Intersectionality is a concept, a tool for analysis, advocacy, and social development that addresses multiple discriminations and helps us understand how different sets of identities impact on access to rights and opportunities. It is a lens through which we all can examine how we approach issues and the examination of policies in our society. Who is being served? What are the subgroups being included or excluded? And how do the dynamics of oppression and privilege work in these situations? The reason I am stuck on this new word is that I am convinced it can help me have some new conversations about these issues of how we live together in society. But I think it also may help me have new conversations with new people. Intersectional awareness helps me build new communities of interest, and I look more closely at the interconnected issues of my life and my community. In the tradition of Dr. King, intersectionality shows that new inclusive coalitions expand our ability to advance change. Now, in this presentation, I have made the word intersectionality sound as though it was more than it is. If I have done, I apologize. It is a word, it's a concept. Yet I hope more than that, if we look towards it. But any good scholar, and many of you in this room are, know there are possible downsides to concepts like this. Nancy Emmert's article, Somewhat Evasion and Symbiosis, describes the way intersectionality can lead to its own issues. It can lead to a tendency to create zero-sum games, where the interests of the intersection and subgroups make it impossible to reach compromises or solutions for the very thing that we started out trying to work on together. It can create fragmentation so that our intersecting interests find each other, but we then splinter to these smaller and smaller subgroups of identity. Black women who are middle class, short, overweight, live in Florida. Or, white men who are gay, so we can create these sort of extensions on and on. And it can also promote sometimes these devastating, what I call pity parties about whose oppression is the greatest, and which of the identities is the most important rather than focusing on the issues. King's life teaches us that leadership is the answer, and that within and among our groups, having effective leadership is the key. I hope that's why many of you are in these programs, to learn the leadership skills and tools that allow you to understand your way to the potential issues that intersectionality might bring, and not get fixated on the wrong thing. Let me end with this. On the occasion of celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, as a scholar and educator, I am reminded that Dr. King said that the arc of moral universe is long, but bends towards justice. I am also reminded that President Obama reminds us that, but here is the thing, not been on its own. It bends because each of us, in our own ways, put our hand on that heart, and we bend it in the direction of justice. Thank you.
We normally would have a long question and answer period, but what we'll have to do due to timing is prevail upon Betty to please be on Adobe with us during our mid-semester residency and answer your questions, and we'll work it all out for you. At this point, I believe Dr. Boxell is going to introduce the next section where we have some wonderful information.
Now that we'll be able to add your name to next year's program and not just the important speakers. We come now to a moment that many of us have been long awaiting, and that is the awarding of the virtual Alexander Woods Award for Excellence in Scholarship. And we're going to do it in a timely fashion and in a meaningful fashion. So I'm going to make a few remarks about the program and then invite Dr. Soto and Dr. Wood to come forward and make a few remarks, and then we'll have the honoree, Dr. Craig. So I just want you to know that as much as we're rooted in the present moment, you know, right now we're here in the air conditioning thinking about the words that we just heard in the speech, it's also important to look back and try to understand how we got to this moment. So just for a moment, think about the beginnings of the MLK specialization at the Union. And the program was just, it was a good day for the Union Institute and University when Dr. Virgil Wood picked our number out of the phone book as a university that he thought would be fertile ground for a program that expands, enriches, and extends the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We at the Union think that was a very good day for us. The day got better because the call was received by Dr. Larry Preston, who then committed the resources and the energy of the university into connecting with this dream and the development of a doctoral specialization. And a big when the provost and the president said, absolutely, this is something we will do, and we will do it well. So we're hoping for, and it looks like we've got, continued better days as people move on and administrations change. We continue to have support for the MLK program, and we are, it is just so very important to us in many, many ways, Virgil, that you dialed our number. And that's part of why we're having this award today. So may I invite you and Nelson to do quick remarks and get us ready to receive. While they're coming up with this look, I do want to know that we're close to 40 students in MLK program, and we were awarded 3 degrees in just 6.5 years.
and I'll be very quick in my remarks. Dr. Wood, I just wanted to say thank you for sending that art. Thank you for looking towards you and your partner, promoting social justice and critical change and being part of our DNA. So thank you.
You all know I'm a Baptist preacher. Well, I've got 5 minutes. It takes a Baptist preacher 5 minutes to clear a stroke. Other thing is, that when a Baptist preacher sees a crowd like this, he's going to take up an offering. But I'm going to do something that Baptist preachers don't do. I'm going to take 3 minutes. I think 5 minutes. My wife, I want her to stand. A beautiful wife. I could give the Nobel Prize to anybody. I'd give it to my lady. She's put up with me for 65 years. Married for 63 years. And did you notice she's still smiling? And I'm thrilled. I am just thrilled. I got something in all of the team here at Union. I have 3 words I want to say. First is thanks. The second word is press on. And the third word is congratulations. First of all, thanks to Union. I considered my old big mama Harvard, and I said, no, Harvard would measure up what needs to be done. And the exploration led me to Dr. Larry Preston. To this day, if it were not there, I would not stand. So I want to say deep thanks. Indeed. Second, I want to say thank you to Union for having the vision. I know the Union story. I know it from your very beginning. My dear friend King Chief was your president way back, and it's been a long line of eminent leadership in this institution. And I sing your praises everywhere I go. You know, this program, this marketing program, I envision you only have 200 students in here. Everybody ought to do something to let folks know, even some of you who are here. So that's my first thank you. Thank you, thank you. But the second word is press on. Now listen, I know the story about PhDs. I did mine at Harvard in 3 years, and the chairman of my committee was the youngest member of my committee, and the least accomplished. And when I was pressing forward, I'm a pressing now, because there are more PhD ADDs out here than there ought to be.
Yes.
So I want to say to those who are in the process right now, be encouraged, press on. And I'll tell you what Professor Zimmerman said to me, my economics professor at Harvard. I was fussing with my dissertation and all of that. And he said to me one day, he said, Virgil, you're trying to write the perfect dissertation. It doesn't exist. I said, I thought they were all perfect. He said, well, they don't exist. He said, babies are born with warts every day. He said, let the baby be born. He said, now don't argue with your professors over what that is they want you to do, because once you get your degree, you got the same thing they got. That's when you make your point. So I want to tell you, those of you who are in the pipeline, do not expect to doubt whether you can go through. You have to do like I told that professor of mine. I said, you may not think I can't finish this, but I'm going to finish this thing, and I finished it in 3 years, all of it. And I'll tell you something else. There's going to be somebody on your committee who understands what you are up against with them other members of the committee. In my case, it was the most senior member, world famous David McClellan, Achievement Motivation Specialist. And he wrote, and I didn't know until later, he wrote a 3-page, statement-based letter to the chairman of the committee telling him that this man's ideas, his style is not your style, but his theory has advanced my theory. End of the story. So that's press on. Press on. Those of you here in the process, press on. Give it what you got and don't linger. Get it done. Okay? But the third word is congratulations. I am happy, glad is a little voice. This ceremony today, not only to have this wonderful award given to our family. I said our family, Virgil and Lillian, that's just Virgil. But my dear friend, Dr. Gregory T. Baker. There's no one in America on the path to do what Greg will do with this work. He's going to tell you about this work. I am thrilled about what he's done. And you have helped him to do it. The last conversation I had with Martin Luther King was 5 weeks before his death. I had the privilege of working with him for 10 years. Then his dad was 16 years after that. Not only was Martin Luther King assassinated, but his mother was also assassinated in October 1974. Martin King's mom. Yes. So not only was Martin King assassinated, he's also his mom, but his dad's story is a great story. I won't get into that except to say this. That the last conversation I had with Martin Luther King was 5 weeks before his death. It was February the 19th, 1960. We were getting ready for the Poor People's Campaign. He had assembled 1,200 urban pastors at the Sheraton Four Ambassadors Hotel, North Miami Beach, Florida. Gave me Thursday night for the keynote address. I think it was because I was dabbling in economics, right? And so he gave me Thursday night. I argued we shouldn't go to Washington and food stamps and extension welfare state. We should go to Wall Street, shut it down. In 2 days, they'll say to Lyndon Johnson, I got some folks up here who want some stuff. Whatever they want, Lyndon, give it to them. Now, what else do you want? Here's what we want. This is what Greg is advocating. That's right. Take the time, take it. Here's what we want. Mr. Wall Street, we want to create a permanent chair at the table where wealth is generated. The poor have a permanent chair at the table where wealth is generated. Martin had said a future society that works is not a capitalist nor social, but the one that bends the strengths of both without the weaknesses of either. And Greg has done some of the most important work in America on this. And I'm happy to be a part of awarding this ceremony to my dear friend, Dr. Gregory T. Baker, and this reads. Oh, this is so beautiful.
So Nelson is going to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm supposed to be assistant.
We were supposed to.
Yeah, just take it after that.
So,
Come on here. Yeah.
So it reads, Virgil Alexander Wood Award for Excellence in Scholarship, presented to Gregory Bailey, PhD.
Yes, sir.
Lights in.
Yes.
I think the lights are.
Oh, it's a light.
Tell us what to do.
You want us to pick up project?
Okay. As they take the picture, Dr. Bailey also received a cash award too to come, so we're grateful for that and excited to honor him. All right.
Okay.
You have a couple of marks in the please, in the sentence.
Lights on here. As we turn on the lights and everything, I just want to say, glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Those are the remarks that Dr. King made some 50 years ago at the conclusion of the march from Selma to Montgomery. And when I think about 50 years, I think about the context of how Union was formed. And I think about the bridge that Union signifies, not only to me, but to others. And over the years, it's been a very progressive institution. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Preston, who I met 7 years ago. Dr. Box, who I had met before, but I was one of her constituents, so I was not as well known to her as I've become a little bit of an irritant over the years, but I've also have really admired her work and her perseverance. Dr. Wood, I actually met some 17 years ago. My pastor went to school with him and his wife at Virginia Union. And when I first decided that I was going to recognize my call to ministry, he told me I needed to come to know a person named Dr. Virgil Wood. He told me to find him at Harvard. It turned out he was in Providence, Rhode Island, a little bit further from Harvard. But I did have the pleasure of meeting him my first week of school in 1998. And we have been very close ever since then. I even was the student pastor at Pond Street Baptist Church. And instead of just being allowed to occasionally preach at his congregation, I preached on many occasions, but also was given many, many books by Dr. Wood. And I had more to read for Dr. Wood than I had for Andover Theological School. And ever since then, and I get a chance to see someone that Dr. Wood had me purchase at least 2 of his books, Dr. Stuart Burns. And I'm glad to see him today because I had read about him and just happened to receive an email from him this morning. So I'm very delighted. Dr. Soto talked about something that I really am trying to put into practice now, and that is implementing the social justice. And I really want to implement the beloved economy. And the word intersectionality, I feel, comes so close to what Dr. King talked about in the concept of the beloved, agape, where it's unconditional, a love that has no boundaries. And that is what I see in the beloved economy. And I want to use that term intersectionality to have a bridge toward the beloved community and the beloved economy. And Dr. Wood also mentioned the difference between communism and capitalism. But there needs to be a third way. And I think that a beloved economy will help go a long way to improving the relationship that everybody has with our economy. And I'll just conclude, unlike the Baptist minister, I'm not going to have a long conclusion. I will use the words that Andrew Young says. You can no more have capitalism, or you can no more have democracy without the right to vote than you can have capitalism without capital. So we have to find ways to make sure that everyone has capital so that they can participate and they won't feel alienated. And I feel that that is what is causing so much of the challenges that we face, even with terrorism. We have young people who don't feel connected to anything. And so we're going to have to make them feel a part of a beloved economy. And a beloved economy doesn't have all the answers, but it has a few. I will conclude there. And I want to thank everybody. Dr. Jackson has left. He was on my committee. Dr. Carol, Chris, I call him that, but I really love his great perseverance, and he dealt with my personality. And sometimes, I don't know if you know, but I'm an attorney.
So there's a good side and a bad side to it. But Chris was able to deal with me on all sides. So I really appreciate that. And Dr. O'Brien is not here, but I appreciate that. And Larry Preston, he kept his word. He gave me a scholarship. So he didn't have a lot of headaches from it. I'll talk to you later.
Is your class done? I always so, yeah, I don't know if there's going to be any questions. I will share. If you want to wait maybe 30, 40 minutes. I can help you. I just don't want to, I can't be loving. Yeah. Yeah.